I would like to introduce our very first presenter, no stranger to most of us here, Dr. Daphne Nahmiash, who will be discussing elder mistreatment and prevention. Daphne has been the president of Handicap Life Dignity. She's an affiliate member of McGill Research Center for Studies on Aging. And Daphne, you and I go back several decades when you were the founder of the NDG Community Committee on Elder Abuse, which Daphne stayed as president for well over 20 years. And so she's continued to be involved and does a lot of seminars and workshops. Everybody wants her. And Daphne, I thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to your expertise.
First of all, we have to take into a note when we're talking about mistreatment or seniors in general, that seniors in Canada come from diverse backgrounds, have a multitude of different values, attitudes, and perspectives about what constitutes the quality of their life, but also about what violence is exactly, and what inappropriate behavior is. And it sounds very obvious probably to a lot of you, but when I do my workshops, which are more intimate in organizations about mistreatment, people actually don't realize sometimes that they are actually doing some mistreatment. And we all have to kind of spend some time thinking about what mistreatment is. So this is why I started off with some discussion about it, even though many of you probably know a lot of it. Next. So, what is the definition? Again, I'll remind you all. Actions, behaviors, or lack of actions or behaviors that cause harm or risk of harm within a trust relationship. So there are lots of other forms of violence, but we're talking specifically here about a trust relationship. And also that trust relationship is broader than just family members. It's anybody who comes pretty regularly into your house to do various things. It could be to deliver the Gazette, it could be to do your shopping, it could be all kinds of different things that you need. Also includes paid caregivers as well as informal caregivers, which could be friends, etc. So, elder abuse, potential abusers and victims. I wanted to present this today. Some information about this very important study, which was finished in 2019. I happened to be on the advisory committee and actually went to a lot of meetings to make sure that they were doing a good job. This was done in Quebec, and this was a magnificent study in my mind because there were almost 9,000 people, actually, who were sampled in that study throughout the whole of Quebec, and not only in Montreal, but everywhere in Quebec. So I'm pleased to see that many of you are here today, actually from different parts of Quebec, and not only from Montreal. So these are some of the findings that are a little bit the kind of outstanding of what they found. They found, in the past, we never said that most victims are women. We did find in the last study that yes, they are, even though many males, or they're reported to be, I should say, because it's what people reported in the sample, though many males are also victims. So those who are frail and in codependent relationships are most likely to be victims of abuse, and abuse is usually hidden or kept a family secret. That we knew before that it was kept a family secret. It's kind of sad to say that it still is, but basically it's very much centered on people who are frail and in codependent relationships. In other words, they depend on one another for different services. What is the prevalence? How many people are victims now in Quebec? Well, that was a little astonishing to me because we always said in Quebec, we quoted the Podnick's study by Elizabeth Podnick, which was 4%. And it was done in the 90s, the early 90s, basically. So the prevalence we found in our latest study, 5.9%, which means that that's quite a big increase over what we were talking about before. So it means, actually, that we're not doing better, we're doing worse than before, Also, we have more seniors, we have more frailty, more people living longer with difficulty and dependent on somebody's people to give them services and care. That was the sample I mentioned before. I put here over 8,000, but there were almost 9,000 people in the center. And there were people living in the community. And there are also a huge amount more who are living in institutions, like long-term care institutions. When we were in, one of the reasons why I moved out of the NDG Community Committee was because I felt I had put most of my lifetime work into people, seniors living into the community, because I ran home care programs, etc., for many years, and had neglected somewhat people living in institutions in long-term care. And now there are so many people living in long-term care homes. This is what we do in Handicap Life Dignity, which for me is also important. And there are a lot of people who basically have not been counted. It was very difficult to get into them, even to count how many people are victims of elder abuse, etc. Also, the perpetrators of abuse and neglect are most often caregivers and helpers in a trust relationship, which is shocking to all of us, but it's not so shocking. Recently, I go into places where I'm going to have my hair done, or going to have my nails done, or whatever, and for whatever the reason, people start telling me about their abusive behavior to their loved ones, and they always justify why, that they don't feel bad about it because they feel that they're in such a difficult situation as caregivers. Basically, usually the people are in long-term care, or they have very bad Alzheimer's diseases, etc., and they're looking after them 24 hours a day with hardly any resources. So basically, people are actually telling me about the fact that they do have abusive behaviors towards. So we know about that, and what we have to do is not judge them, but offer them help, and more help and resources that they need. And we're still not doing that in our society. That's one of the messages I want to give today. As I mentioned, many seniors in these residences are victims. Next, please. Okay, so these are the list of the types of abuse and neglect. I don't have time to go through them all. I think most of you know what they are. All of the studies really only take into account in the research of physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, financial, material, and neglect, pretty much, and don't very much add all the additional ones. But all of these actually are different types of abuse and neglect, and important. Next, please. Who are the seniors most likely to experience abuse that we found? Again, I'll repeat the fact that people who receive home care or other services in the homes, basically, people who need help with daily activities, people who perceive their health to be fair or poor, and people who have been victims before of past violence before the age of 65. We always suspected that that was the case, and I found it actually in my own doctoral thesis, which was on mistreatment of older adults. But now it was quite clear in our big study that this is the case, actually, that most of the people, which is very sad. So we have to also take care of people from an early age who have been victims of violence. And people who live alone. Next, please. Not all of them live alone, but the tendency is that most of them live alone. So who are the most likely people to perpetrate abuse? More men than women were mentioned as perpetrators by seniors, regardless of the type of abuse. It doesn't really matter what type. Before we kind of used to say, oh, it was this kind of abuse or not, but now it doesn't matter. People are, in general, the sample of people that we interviewed basically were were saying that more men than women were the perpetrators. Spouses, ex-spouses and children, and stepchildren also, were the most frequent perpetrators of psychological abuse. Psychological abuse, according to my study here, this is part of the study basically here, psychological was by far the most important abuse that people talked about. We tend to ignore psychological abuse a lot because it doesn't seem so bad. But actually it is bad, and it is, some of it actually is now considered a crime in terms of our laws. So, and people can be actually taken to court by threats, large threats, humiliations, etc., if it's known to be very severe. A third of perpetrators live with seniors at the time of the abuse too. So most live alone, but a third of them, the perpetrators, live with the seniors at the time of the abuse. Next, please. I'm not going to go through all of this. This is pretty similar to what I've been saying in the past. Substance abuse by the perpetrators is a big issue still. Close living arrangements, codependent relationships, which I mentioned before. I'm not going to go into gender issues. This is not enough time to explain it. Social isolation, lack of social support, keeping abuse a family secret. That means that people are not reporting it. And those are some of the reasons. I'll go into a few more after. But mainly also for caregivers, which came out very clearly in our studies, is that depression of caregivers. And this is very treatable. So we should be able to prevent abuse if we can help more the caregivers who are depressed and diagnose that depression, etc. So that for me was a very, very important way in which we can prevent mistreatment continuing or happening. Not waiting until it's already happened. Next, please. So what are the signs also of systemic abuse? Basically, systemic abuse means that in general, the way systems and the way society treats older adults and how that is related to elder abuse. And that most of you have probably heard me talking about ageism, which is the major thing, and came out particularly in the pandemic when it's the discrimination against people because of their age. What we found in a recent film, which I've been working on with Cummings Center, and is already finished now, and there will be 2 more productions of the film on ageism. It's called Ageless. Basically, that young people also suffer a lot from ageism. So we kind of don't think about that when we're thinking about ageism. But since we're talking about seniors today mainly, I'm going to focus more on seniors. So these are negative societal images that we have of seniors, which are still existing, depicting seniors as marginal, frail, vulnerable, and dependent through media, policies in healthcare, workforce, technology, and laws. I could spend an hour, I only got 5 minutes left, talking about each one of those, so that you might have some questions after. Discriminatory social policies such as inadequate pensions for older adults, inadequate housing, all of that. This is basically ageism, the way we treat seniors also. Rules and conditions that impair the quality of life of older adults. And these are particularly relevant to institutional cases of elder abuse and neglect. So how can we prevent basically ageism or mistreatment in general? We can expand the awareness programs to combat elder mistreatment in the community and in institutions. This is what I've tried to do for the last 50 years, and I was thinking last night, as I was thinking about this conference, basically, it's kind of sad that we still are doing the same thing. So we are failing somehow. We're not doing enough, and we're not doing it's on the right tracks. Expand awareness programs also to combat ageism, to encourage intergenerational projects. One of the main things that comes out when studies on ageism and other systemic problems is basically we need to work with all our generations and not be competing one generation against another, etc. So intergenerational projects are very important, which also include giving knowledge about the aging process, which is a big thing that we should be doing now. I learned in a recent research that I've been doing about ageism. We can now encourage the use of cameras and other monitoring methods in institutions. And I saw that in the laws that this is actually talked about now, which is good. In the past we couldn't do it, because that gives us proof. For example, if you have to go to court, you need proof. You can't just say, look, this happened. You have to be able to show that it happened as much as possible in order to get any action. So other things, making sure that laws and amendments to Quebec, mistreatment laws, are known to professionals and members of the public and interveners. The thing about this is that people are always clamoring for protection laws, but basically we have them. And I have 13 pages, which I actually brought today, 13 pages in English, which actually spell out how the amendments have been made since 2009, when the first act was made to improve the protection laws in terms of elder mistreatment. And reading it through again myself, these 13 pages, I think everybody should really have a copy of these 13 pages, read them, or read them again, and be very familiar with them, because I don't think that we are familiar, and I don't think we use the laws enough. However, it's very difficult also using the law, because it's long, it's difficult, we need people to accompany as volunteers to actually make sure that we're looking after the people, etc. Screening tools we have. I actually did some of them myself, which are quite effective. They're like 90% effective, the screening tools, in finding cases of abuse and neglect. But the point is, they're not used throughout Quebec. I'm not sure why, but they're not used. And it costs us a lot of money to actually do the research and to produce them. They're used in some places throughout the world, but not necessarily in Quebec where we made them. We actually made them in Montreal. And there are other ones besides my own, across Canada, that have been made, and they're effective. Policies and complaint mechanisms to deal with mistreatment cases must not only be implemented, but explained in detail to all residents, caregivers, and all professionals on day shifts, evening, and night shifts. One of the big problems is the turnover of staff. See, one of the things about the protection laws, speaking about the law today, is that seniors do not wish to be treated like children, and therefore don't need to be overprotected. But they need security, and for that we have the maltreatment laws. But you need to be familiar with them, how to use them, but they're kind of a last resort, bringing people to court. Most of the people die before their cases ever get dealt with, from my experience. It's very long, it's difficult, people don't like it, it's hard, etc.